exam 2 is coming up. So when I'm through giving this little lecture today, I'm going to hand the floor over to Dr. Grubaugh, who can give you some, who has some information to give you, and maybe you might have an opportunity to ask some questions. Be sure and ask him what's going to be on the exam. He loves it when people ask that. Okay. Yeah. I got absolutely no feedback whatsoever from that. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, any questions before I get started? Okay. All right.
So surveys, one thing,
Yes.
you mentioned that the paper, the next part of the paper is coming due. Just because it doesn't mean focus on just this part of the paper. You have all sorts of comments we made on the last part.
Oh, yeah.
We want to see those have been made.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll be grading the whole thing. So yeah, you're adding on to what you turned in before, but you're addressing our comments to what you turned in before, and then adding on to that.
Ignoring them is a very, very bad thing.
Oh yeah, the consequences will be grave if we told you to do something and you didn't.
Yeah, many did.
Yeah, or will be littered with casualties. So I've already mentioned that there's a couple types of a couple ways of collecting data other than going out into the field. One of them, at least 2 or 3 of you are doing, you're using secondary data. You're using data from other studies or that have been done in the past that have just never been analyzed. A lot of the time when we collect field data, we collect more than we need. If you're homing in a telemetry study on an animal, that takes a lot of time and effort and work. And if the only thing you're interested in is what species of tree is this bird in, that's easy to write. But as long as you're there, you could note the weather conditions, the temperature, the elevation, the diameter of the tree, the height of the tree, how close is the tree to water, are there other birds in the tree, any number of other things, right? And you might not need that data, but it could be that in the future somebody else wants to look at that and you've got it. So there's a lot of opportunity to use unused data from past studies. And another type of data that we often collect is data that involves what do people think about something, right? That's not wildlife field data. We talk about that sub-discipline of natural resources management or wildlife management that involves getting people's opinions and thoughts on stuff is human dimensions of natural resources. There's a journal, the Human Dimensions Journal. And there are many professors of wildlife whose that's what they do. They do survey. They do survey work. They have human dimensions laboratories. Although not all of human dimensions is surveying, most surveys dealing with wildlife we consider human dimensions work. So that could be questions that we ask people about, behaviors. Do you hunt or trap or watch wildlife? If so, how often? In what way? Where? When? How much do you spend? Do you hunt this way or that way or whatever? What do you think about this? What do you believe is the right way to do this? Do you think that we should put bears or elk back in West Tennessee? What is your attitude? What are your thoughts about this? What do you know about this? Facts. What do you believe to be the case? How much knowledge do you have about black panthers in Tennessee or global warming or whatever? What are your beliefs? And you can ask these questions a lot of ways. And historically, we did ask in a lot of ways. We asked in person, through interviews, directly interviewing people. We asked over the telephone. We asked through the mail. And of course, today, the way we usually do it is over the internet, right? And that's not to say that that's the only way we should ever do it, because you may or may not be getting all of the audience that you want. If you're really interested in equal representation or equal response from people from your generation and people from my generation or my parents' generation, you're going to get a whole lot more younger generation response using the internet than old users like us, right? So, especially that one in the back. But that's not to say that we should always use it or we should never use it. It's a very powerful tool we use all the time now, but these other tools are still valid. I want to make an important point. Before we conduct any human research, there are ethical considerations. Most universities, all universities, require something called an Institutional Review Board for the Protection of Human Subjects in Research application, and we shorten that to an IRB application. So there's some surveys that might not require this. For example, if we're surveying organizations or institutions and not individual people. But on the other hand, if we're asking people about their personal opinions of something or to do something outside of wildlife, sometimes there are people, for example, who ask them, taste these different seasonings and tell us which you like better. Well, that could be something that could physically impact somebody, or can you do this thing? So these are to protect them physically, and perhaps to protect them emotionally, but it's also, these surveys are checking to be sure that we have created the survey in such a way to protect people, their confidentiality. Imagine a situation where I might ask you questions, have you ever broken the law? Have you ever violated a hunting or fishing law? And you say, yeah, and then the next time you apply to be a game warden, somebody pulls out this old survey and says we're never going to hire you. You're never going to work in this profession because you've been a violator. Okay, so we have things in place in surveys to protect people's confidentiality, to protect them physically and emotionally. Make sense? And those surveys, those applications, often they have to go through several levels of approval. So often it takes a week or weeks to get those approved. Did you say you're on the IRB committee right now?
No, I'm chair ICUC.
Yeah, I knew you were on ICUC. I thought
No,
you're not IRB.
So
Okay.
of course, we've had an experience in this class with IRBs.
Yeah.
We've used, some people have research that have used people in this class.
Right.
And the students had to go through an IRB.
They did, and it usually took about 2 to 3 weeks to get that approved.
It was a little bit longer.
A little longer than that, even about a month or so.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a process, that you have to account for. So you can imagine these different types of surveys have strengths and weaknesses. An in-person survey, it takes a lot more work to get a sample. It's easy to send out I could send out a questionnaire on the UT Martin Wildlife listserver. Send out one questionnaire, it goes to hundreds of people. But to go to an individual person for an interview, I have to set up a booth or stand in the corridor in the university center or at a mall or at an airport or somewhere and wait for somebody to come by and say, excuse me, do you have a minute? And you say, no, go away, you creep. So it takes a lot more work to get a sample. Your cooperation rate in person is moderate, because some people it's hard to say no when they're right there in my grill. Other people are very nervous about having somebody approach them personally. The cost per response is high because you're getting one at a time and you're having to expend the time and energy to go up to them. An advantage is that you can develop rapport with them and you can pick up nonverbal cues. Now I'm going to talk about different types of survey questions, and there's some surveys that are very black and white. They're very objective, and those advantages might not be so important there. But if you have a more subjective survey that allows you to branch out, if they say something, you can follow up with another question, you can sometimes get a lot more information. It might be subjective information, but it might be a lot more. For example, if I say, have you been involved in any collaborative work with Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency? And they say, no, I hate those people. Oh, if they said just no on a survey, okay. But if you say, I hate those people, oh, there's something going on there. So tell me why. I can learn a little bit more about your relationship with TWRA, right? So that rapport those cues can be helpful potentially. Disadvantages is that, yeah, again, you walk up to a stranger and it's, a stranger danger, who's this weird person? And again, it's expensive, one-on-one, one at a time. Telephone, it's pretty easy, you can sit or pay somebody to sit there at a phone and just call numbers. Cooperation rate, this says cooperation rate is high. I think it used to be a lot higher. I think today, more people don't even answer their phone at all if they don't know them. So this is probably should be low now. Cost per respondent is not as much as walking up to them, but it's more expensive than a computer. Advantages, it's fast. You can have somebody. A lot of these human dimensions, wildlife labs, professors just have students, a room full of students sitting at phones with their list of questions, and they're just calling. They call thousands and thousands of people, one after the other after the other. They're getting a whole bunch of hang-ups. But for if they get 100 hang-ups and they get 5 responses, okay, I got 5 responses, in an hour or half hour or whatever. Disadvantage of the telephone, limited time. It's a non-random sample. It doesn't have to be non-random, but it's non-random insofar as the people you're answering have phones and made their phone numbers available. So there can be issues there. A mall intercept is just you go to a public place, like for example, a mall, the university center. If your population that you're wanting to sample from is UT Martin students on the main campus this year. An airport, a place where busy, a busy public area. You can set up a booth at the soybean festival, so you're just catching people in public. It's really easy because there's a whole lot of people, a lot of targets. Cooperation rate is moderate. Cost is medium. It can be really fast. Again, it's a non-random sample. It's the people who are there, that population. Male, easy, low cooperation rate. How many of you have gotten mail surveys? I'm going to count this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of you. How many of you usually throw mail surveys away? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of 10. Okay, there we go. So, a lot of them get tossed. Expensive, you're paying for postage. Disadvantage, it's non-random sample unless you can come up with a random way to decide who to mail to. Yeah.
How come expensive is an advantage?
Good question. That should not be an advantage, should it? Yeah. And I don't even remember, I've had that there for a little while. I don't remember if that's my
I think it was
mistake.
actually expansive.
Expansive, yeah.
So many places.
Sure, we'll say that. Thank you. Yeah, good. No, that is a disadvantage, right? I was going to say it's easy, but yeah, it's right there. It's easy to get a bunch of addresses and just mail it out and see who you get. Computer assisted is the reason that so many surveys are either social media or email now is because it's just so easy. You usually get a much higher cooperation rate than the others, even though you can still get relatively low. Cost per respondent is very low. Advantages, there can be automatic data entry if you there's a lot of ways to automate this process. Has anybody been involved with things like SurveyMonkey or used any types of online survey software? Yeah, it can be super simple. You have to know how to work your way around a computer a little bit. So, what are the reasons to do a survey? You're interested in individual people. What are the characteristics of people who choose to buy a lifetime license or a lifetime national park pass? Interests not in individuals, but in aggregations of views or values. Those who are against buying more public land. All the people who say they don't want TWRA to buy more WMA lands. Okay, what is driving that value that you have? Why are you against it? Interest in recent and current events. What is your opinion regarding RAWA? Regarding this potential legislation, etc. Interest in big groups. what do people think about cougars in Tennessee or bears in West Tennessee? So these all have value, and we could ask any number of different types we could develop any number of different types of hypotheses for any of these. So this is probably the best method for a social scientist, a wildlife-related social scientist who's interested in collecting original data for describing a population that's too large to observe directly. If I want to know what the UT Martin wildlife majors or natural resource majors or natural resource and geoscience majors think about me doubling the green fee at UT Martin, I don't really have to get a sample of the population. The population is about 150 to 180 students. I can ask that question of the entire population and find out the answer. But if you have a really big population, the citizens of Tennessee, or even maybe the students at UT Martin, and I don't know that I can get an answer from every single one of them, and this can be good. Carefully constructed, standardized questionnaires provide data in the same form from all respondents. So, I'm about to talk about the difference between questionnaires and actual surveys, where I go up and ask somebody questions. A questionnaire where the questions are written out ensure that everybody is getting the exact same question, and there's value in that if we're trying to do some sort of analysis of comparison. So that questionnaire, what that's different from is when we go up and talk to somebody. That's an interview, okay? An interview is when you ask specific questions of a respondent, you record their responses, and it could be questions that you read off a sheet of paper, so it's the exact same question for every person. There can be differences in inflection, there can be nonverbal cues that can cause variation in how those questions are perceived. But this does give the interviewer an opportunity to get more in depth than a questionnaire of written questions does. So it can be structured where you just read off the questions off the sheet of paper and let them answer them, okay? But it can be a little bit more unstructured too, where you don't have a specific agenda, there's flexibility. So you ask a question and they answer this, and based on their answer you say, oh, okay, I'm gonna ask a follow-up question then. Or, that's interesting, that's different than what I've been hearing from other people, can you tell me why that's your answer? So it becomes a lot more subjective, and that's a lot harder to bring together into a package and analyze to test a hypothesis, but it can potentially give you a lot more information. This is very often more of an exploratory thing. Maybe it's sort of, you might think of it kind of like a little bit of a pilot study before you come up with your final survey that you're gonna do later that tends to be more specific, that allows you to test that hypothesis. The questionnaire is those written questions, pen and paper. Usually the questionnaire allows, and with an IRB usually requires anonymity. So usually we a lot of questionnaires, if we're asking about anything that might be sensitive information, we don't ask for things like what's your name, what's your address, what's your contact information, your email, anything that would allow somebody to identify that person individually and incriminate them in some way in the future. And that allows them to feel free to give an honest response. Oh yeah, I violate hunting laws all the time. I'm the best poacher in West Tennessee, and feel secure that can't come back on. Questions should be standardized. Everyone gets the same question, and they should be determined to be valid and reliable. And the way that we do that is by, we come up with a draft questionnaire and we send it out often to 5 people, and we have them answer it and give us feedback on the answers. Then they might say question number 37 could be interpreted, I interpreted it this way, is that what you meant? Or when you're reading their responses, you realize, oh, I see from here that they interpreted that. I see that second sentence in my question is worded ambiguously. I need to change how that's written so that there's no question about what I'm asking. So sending out a pilot survey to truth it, to get rid of those that ambiguity, and make sure that it's valid, that's reliable, that everybody is interpreting it the same way, and there's no way that they can get out of answering it the way I want them to. This requires self-reporting, and it's subject to recall bias, and I think I talked more about that in a few minutes. The disadvantage is if you get an unusual answer, unlike in an interview where you can follow up on it. Oh, why did you say that? You can't. So you lose potential useful additional information. But what you gain is standardized so that you can actually compare. If you have a good design, that hopefully will take care of that. And you send it out a pilot test. You've noted all the weaknesses in your questions and fixed them, so you have a good design in questions. Hopefully you won't have that weakness there. So 5 types of questions. You can have closed-ended questions where they respond from several choices. So a simple dichotomous response question is very common. Did you visit at least one state park this year? Yes or no, right? Well, that doesn't answer, if it's yes, how many did you visit? That could be a follow-up question, but that might be all the information you need, depending on what your hypothesis is, right? Or a response over a continuum. How important do you feel public land availability is to your likelihood of hunting? Very, somewhat, not sure, right? Usually there's a not sure option in there somewhere, some sort of option like that. Branching questions. Do you read a magazine such as Tennessee Wildlife at least one time per month? No. Go to question 3. Yes. If so, how many hours do you spend reading this magazine? Okay, and that gives you an open-ended, they could say 1 or 1 million, or none. Rank ordering, and you've all seen these questions before, right? But these all are different ways of getting at information. It just depends on what your hypothesis is that you're wanting to test. The following are characteristics of a researcher. Order them in terms of importance, from 1 most important to 4 least important. And you want to be sure that your questions are not confusing. The question might be grammatically correct, but structured in such a way that somebody who's not reading carefully might accidentally get those backwards for some reason, for example. So you have to be sure that the questions are very clear, and that usually means keeping them as simple as possible. Comes a point, though, it becomes so simple you lose the value or power of what you're looking for, so you have to find that sweet spot. A compromise between useful and answerable, right? And then for subjective questionnaires, you often get this with interviews. You can have open-ended. Describe the characteristics that you feel make a park worth visiting. And you might be thinking the most of the answers I'm going to get are things like pretty, good facilities, inexpensive, close by, and they say something unexpected like one that has cerulean warblers in it. Oh, I didn't see that, okay. How many people said they're looking for some species of animal? That's why they go there. Maybe that takes us somewhere new. So these open-ended questions might not be very good for objective hypothesis testing, but they could be useful for, just exploring and getting new unexpected information. Remember this, measurement scales, continuous, categorical. Categorical assigns or classifies, so nominal data is gender, hunter versus non-hunter, which park do they visit, ethnic group. Ordinal is values, yes, no, or somewhere in the middle. Continuous data, interval or ratio could be how old are you, how many years have you been doing this, etc. So just as we have continuous and categorical data in field research, so do we in survey research. And I don't think I put this on Canvas yet, but I will. I can, okay. Who's familiar with the Likert scale? We see this in surveys frequently. How much do you agree with this statement? We should put bears back on the UT Martin campus again, where they used to be. Strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. This is a common technique. This right here is a very important consideration in survey research. How much of a response rate do you get? This is one of the guides to how well representative your data represents your population. A high response rate means that there's a less chance of significant response bias than a low response rate. A low response rate is a danger signal. The non-respondents are likely to differ from the respondents in ways other than just their willingness to participate in the survey. Does that make sense to you guys? It could be that people don't respond to a survey. It could be just because they're busy, they don't want to. It could be because they don't like the agency or institution that you're working for. It could be because they're all a bunch of poachers. It could be because something that means that they are representative of one end of the continuum of people that you're trying to sample, and that causes a bias. That means all of your sample is coming from. If this is your distribution, your population distribution, and you're not getting responses from here, or from here, or from here, right? Then the responses you're getting are not representative, right? Good. Okay. So there's a fellow named Babby who suggested that if you can get a response rate, and as you might imagine, this is what we're often trying to do in surveys, is get a high response rate. If you get a response rate of 50%, this is kind of subjective rule of thumb. He says that's what you're shooting for, is adequate, barely adequate, but good enough for analysis and reporting. 60% would be considered a good response rate, and 70%, you don't get that very often, that's really good. So, how many of you have received a survey before, and you tossed it or didn't answer it, and then they contacted you again, at least once, and said, we're gonna try you again. Yeah, this often happens. What are they doing, right? They're trying to get their response rate up, okay? And they know that okay, they're gonna send this survey to the 90% of people they sent it to before that didn't respond. This could be a national survey. Maybe they sent it to 10 million people. They're going to send it to the 90% of those people, the 9 million people who didn't respond. And they know that most of them are going to throw it away again. But if they can get another million or 500,000 out of that, that could get their response rate, up, eventually, if they keep on asking and keep on asking. And it's going to be diminishing returns, but it's going to be enough finally to where they can get that magic 50% at least that they're looking for, right? I often ask this, I have asked this, I'm not going to ask you now because I'm going to tell you the question, but I've asked this the last several years on an exam in this class. If you send a survey to a sample and you get a 45% response rate, and you were hoping for at least 50%, what's the best thing you should do? Should you throw it away and write another survey? No. Should you throw all your responses out and send it to a bunch of new people? Should you resend it to the same people who didn't respond? And a couple other answers. And most of the class usually says you should throw away all the responses and send it to a bunch of people again, or a bunch of new people. And that's not right. That's not the right answer. The answer is, if you're trying to get that response rate up to 50%, resend it to the people who didn't answer and hope that some of them will answer so that you can get that 45% up to 50. Does that make sense? Are you hearing me? Because most of the class wasn't apparently before. Good. Okay. Got that? That's important information. Some people think of surveys as archaeology. They're digging for gold. And if you ask the right question in the right way, maybe you'll find it, and that can be good. But sometimes there's just no gold there. Sometimes you're looking for some magic opinion, and people just don't know or care. If I ask, sorry, pick on you, not really. If I ask our excellent geoscience students here, what do you think of RAWA? Should it pass or not? Your response is, what the heck is RAWA? There's no reason why you should know what that is. It's wildlife legislation. You don't have an opinion on it because you don't know what it is, right? And that's often the case. People might not have attitudes or opinions. Should we have yellow shafted bunion ears in the Smoky Mountains again? You might be thinking, I don't know, don't care, I don't know what that is. That's because there is no such thing. People often don't have opinions. So what do you do when people don't have attitudes? The people that you're surveying are often wary of opinion polls about complex issues. If I ask you about some complicated legislation about trade laws, even though you might kind of have a general understanding of what I'm talking about, but you don't really have a strong opinion because you don't feel like you have quite enough information, right? So, if you're just asking the public about something that you might know all about, but it's complex, then you might keep in mind that the value of the responses should be taken perhaps to some degree with a grain of salt, because there's no reason why they should know as much about it as you have because you've studied it. So sometimes it's good to try to figure out, do they know anything about what I'm talking about? Create a mushiness index. You have an option that says, I don't know what that is, or I don't have an opinion on this. I don't know. Offer a middle position. I'm moderate on this. Offer them an I don't know. Descriptive statistics are often the way that we report survey results. Not with hypothesis tests, not with inferential statistics, especially when it comes to interview surveys, because very often the responses are subjective. 50% of responses had some sort of a positive response or something like that, right? A third of them came from cities or suburban areas. Sometimes if we do use inferential statistics, a lot of the time, not always, it depends on the nature of the question, we're going to use chi-square analysis. There's somebody in class who's going to be using kind of survey data, and they're going to be doing chi-square analysis to look at relationships between different variables, frequencies. So strengths. What just happened? Strengths of survey research. It can be the best way to quickly get a feel for the consensus or the trends within large groups of folks. It can be very flexible. It allows a lot of flexibility, especially if you're willing to put up with subjective data that might only be able to be described with descriptive statistics instead of inferential. There's potential for hypothesis testing, but you have to be real careful to set up your questions in such a way up front, knowing what statistical test you're going to run on those responses. And that's where I think a lot of people go wrong. They create a survey, they get the data, and then they go, how the heck am I going to test a hypothesis on this? These answers don't allow me to do that. So you have to think real hard about how you're going to do that up front. Encourages standardization and systematic comparison more than just asking general questions. But when you standardize, you lose some variability, some power. Often survey gets to what, but not why. I would rather go to this park than that park. I hunt this more than that. But it doesn't as easily get to the why of it. And a lot of times people just don't know. They don't have an opinion. I don't know. I do it just because. I like to deer hunt more than I like to turkey hunt just because. I like mallards more than pintails just because. That's all I got. And there's nothing much you can do about that. They may not actively engage. Then they might lie. just because they can. And you know what? We don't have any controls for that. If you're doing an interview, you can look them in the eye and make yourself a note. This guy seemed kind of shifty to me, but you can't know if somebody's lying or not. So the day that you collect in the field, this animal, I just honed in on it, it's there. This animal is in the trap, right? There's no lie, but Piper, if you tell me, yeah, I want bears in West Tennessee, and you really don't, I've got no way of knowing whether that's true. And that is what I have to say about survey research. Good? Okay. Dr. Grubaugh,
Yay.
the floor is yours.
Why, thank you. Okay, so a couple things I want to talk about first of all. The first one I'm talking about, I've got Excel assignment, your Excel assignment is number 4 here. So I'll be grading those. But I did do a quick run through on them real quick. And I want to remind you, does everyone remember the last question? Or have you slept since then? Yeah. So it dealt with pawpaws. Okay? And I had given you data about pawpaws and their ability to produce fruit, number of fruit per pawpaw tree, compared to the number of sapsucker holes. Yellow belly sapsuckers love to go after these trees. Everybody remember that so far? Sounding familiar? Do you remember, was this correlation between these two, was it significant?
Yes.
Do you remember? Yes. Okay. What kind of correlation was it?
Negative.
It was a negative correlation. And then, just for feces and giggles, I asked you a question. My question was, based on these data, I will read my question that I developed. The question was, okay, based on these results, can we conclude that the sapsucker damage to pawpaw trees causes reduced fruit production? What did most of you say?
Probably yes.
Most of you said yes. You can't conclude that. Remember, correlation is not cause and effect. It turns out, what could have happened is that trees that are poor producers of fruit are poor producers because they're being infested by insects that the sapsucker is going after. Yeah, so it's not the sapsucker. So you can't do that. So several of you got this right and everything, but many of you got this wrong. This is the big bear trap when it comes to correlation coefficients, which is why it does not. Again, this is what the whole world tries to make you believe. The examples I gave before. Students that go to med school read more than those that don't. Therefore, if I want to go to med school, I need to read more. You can't say that. It just so happens that people who go to med school read a lot. That's not why they're going to med school, necessarily. So, and you hear it all the time, especially in the world of education. People, that's constantly used as banners hold up why we have to have magnet schools, why we shouldn't have magnet schools, why we should have private schools, why we should these correlations.
Is there like a better way to word it, whereas like it's not a causation, but it can be like an end because it correlates?
No.
Or is that just as...
Stay the heck away from it. All
Okay.
you want to say is that they are correlated, however, that doesn't indicate a cause and effect.
Okay.
Yeah, just stay the heck away from it. So that was that one. And I noticed a lot of them, people, on that first graph, there was no correlation. So should there have been a regression line? Nay.
No.
I did have a few of those pop up. So, but anyway, but that was, yeah, so that's what we're after that. Okay, so that's the one thing I want to bring up, so I'll be grading those just to let you know. Now, the question at hand, many of you have had exams from me before, but so there will be some similarities to this exam to those exams, but there may be some differences too, so I want to well, first of all, any questions in general before I start to prattle on as I have leaf to do?
Like on your Excel assignments, usually when like the videos, usually when it starts, you have some type of like definitions and stuff.
Mhm.
Do we need to make sure you, like, if it's on the video for the test? So,
Okay.
like,
I'm not, Anita, it's been a while since I saw those. So what might be an example? Cam.
What's gonna be on it?
Thanks, Cam. God loves you, Cam. And that's one. Okay, so, yeah.
Does God
Yeah.
love you?
All sorts of wonderful things.
Can't wait.
Yeah. Okay, here it is. Here it is. First, yeah. So, fictional data, copies, no, that's just basically just telling you what I'm
What
doing.
you're doing,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, so, I mean, you should know to do those things,
Yeah.
so, again, so, I mean, one thing you can expect, Cam, is that I'm going to be, that you should know which of these inferential statistics are used for what. That, that's gonna, definitely gonna be a big one. I'll be asking that some way, shape, or form. When, on this exam, what I do is, for those who haven't had an exam from me before, the first part of the exam opens up with a series of multiple choice questions. I do that because that's what you're used to seeing. And so I lull you to a false sense of confidence. Then you turn the page and plunge into madness. So in this class, the way I like to do things here is because you are all basically, even my geoscientists, you are all basically come from an applied science. Application of stuff to a situation. So I will give you application problems. These will be case studies. So I will set up some kind of scenario. As the manager of a WMA in West Tennessee, you want to know this, that, and the other thing. And how will you do that? So I'm going to ask you, so what will some of the questions look like? So there was, Amber asked me an excellent question earlier this morning. Will you have to actually do Excel stuff? No. If we had you actually do Excel stuff, the test would be 3 to 4 hours in length, and you would be making graphs and all that. Instead, I'll be giving you output you need to interpret and use in different ways. And so you'll be seeing stuff as it comes out from Excel, and then I'll ask you a whole series of questions about it. That's one way to do that. I might be giving you some graphs and say interpret these graphs or finish these graphs. Might be another question I ask you to do, or what does this mean on this graph? Or one that I'm really thinking about now after looking at stuff, give you a graph and say, what's wrong with this graph? Because we've had, because I've been pointing out numerous things that are over again. And the big one on Excel assignment 3, I hope it gets your attention on this so you looked at that. In that first, you remember I had you run an ANOVA. Had to do 3 ANOVAs. The first ANOVA, the data were not significant. And many of you said that in your thing, the data were not significant. In parentheses, what did you put? ANOVA and Tukey's. You didn't run a Tukey's. You liar, liar, liar. Okay? If you did run a Tukey's, then the stats police would have come and arrested you because the ANOVA was not significant. If the ANOVA is not significant, the game is over. Thanks for playing. Lovely party gifts. But you do not run an ANOVA. So don't tell me you did when you didn't. So that's another one I got much on. So I'm kind of a stickler on things like that. Okay, so that's some general rambling. Any questions now?
How much math will we be doing in terms of like knowing how to calculate?
Very good. Have a calculator.
Okay.
Bring a calculator with you and your hymnals. You'll need those as well. Or you might need. I'm not sure yet. But have them with you. Very good question. Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, I can guarantee you will be doing some math.
Do you know what specific equations we'll need to know? Like, will we be calculating standard deviation, Q tests?
You will not be calculating a Tukey.
Okay.
You might be interpreting data from a Tukey's, things like that, but you will not be calculating a Tukey. I might ask you standard deviation.
Okay.
I don't know yet. Might ask you variance.
Maybe some of the work that we've been doing Tuesday from our last class.
with the different
Yeah, chi-square.
chi-squares.
Oh, chi-square, oh yeah, that one's, yeah, the chi-square, maybe, probably won't ask you to do a t-test by hand, that would be rude.
Yeah, I think the majority of what I'm wondering is what equations do I need to go back and make sure
Well,
I actually know.
How about the equation for an F-test?
See, like that, I need to go back and figure out that.
What is, how do you calculate an F statistic? Remember? You take the bigger variance and divide it by the smaller variance. That's it. Yeah. But then, what do you compare it to becomes, so. Yeah, expect to do some math, so that would be one to go back and check on. Yeah, remember the equation for chi-square, when you use chi-square. There's a lot of neat stuff I can put on here. Other questions? These have been very good questions so far. Good. Yeah. And Cam, yours was good too. You did a good job. Other questions? That's good. That's all I got then.
Study hard.
Yeah.